Hey Teresa, good afternoon. How are you?
I am well. How are you today?
Doing wonderful. So today I wanted to bring you on again just to talk to everybody a little bit about your own story of just what you're passionate about when it comes to helping people, especially women in the same age range as you and professional women who suffer with autoimmune conditions. I know we were talking a little bit about this off camera about different conditions and such, and my wife has suffered with Hashimoto's. You've suffered with your own autoimmune condition, and I just want you to give a little bit of backstory on what that was like, and
Yeah.
then just express to the viewers here to give them hope.
Yeah. Well, I had this inspiration this week. I am learning to be more intentional. So I woke up one morning and I got ready and I came and sat at my desk and I was like, you know what? I'm going to say which is on my heart, which is, autoimmune doesn't have to define us, and it's also not the end. Like it can be healed. It's a total myth to say that once you have an autoimmune, that's it. It's yours for life. You're never going to be without it. That's simply not the truth. There are things that we can do to heal the body, optimize the cells, optimize the way the body works, heal the gut. There's so many things that we can do. And that was my story. My story started, I think probably the first time I remember being pretty sick was when I was 16. Looking back now, they didn't test me for it. I'm pretty sure I had mono. I was my dad was really strict. He never let us like be off school. Like we just couldn't be home. Like house had to be on fire, he was just that way. And I remember one day being so sick, and actually I was off for an entire week. I was so sick. And then, I get better from that and I get out of high school and decided to get married rather than go to college. And I was just tired all the time. And I had like I was a stay-at-home mom. I had um five kids, and I had like three kids pretty close together. And I just thought, well, it was just like being a young mother. You're tired, you're always pregnant or nursing, you never get enough sleep. And so I just thought being tired was just the way to go. And then things started to hurt. And I thought, okay, well, that's new. And I had been in a car accident. I forgot to throw this in there before I got married. I'm sorry, it was after I got married, at the beginning of my marriage, before I had my first daughter, is what I meant to say. I was in a really bad car accident where I was T-boned by a car going 50 miles an hour. I actually died. I came back to life, and like hands laid on me, totally healed. Everything was fine except my back. That's the only thing, for whatever reason, was not healed. All the internal injuries were healed. And and that's a whole nother story for a really long talk. But anyway, so, like here I am, I'm having these kids and I'm, staying home, I'm tired and I hurt. And I thought, well, okay, it's just my back. I had to go to the chiropractor and I thought maybe that was what was it. Then then all of a sudden, and then I I went back to school, and my kids went to school and I went back to school and I became a nurse and I started working in the ICU. And then it was like, okay, well, now it's all the stress. I'm under all the stress and I'm working night shift. And there was always a reason why I was so tired, except
Mhm.
that it got worse and worse and worse, to the point that in 2007, it's 2006, I had remarried. 2007, I was expecting, I lost my baby, and then it was like the bottom just fell out. Everything, literally my health just completely fell apart. I couldn't move. Everything hurt. I couldn't walk up the stairs. I just felt like I would walk 7 steps and feel like I had like a weight of bricks in a backpack on my back. And And I, and I like I ate organic and I was a vegetarian. I thought I was doing everything well and everything right. Couldn't figure out, and I only used herbs and homeopathy. I didn't take any medicine. I thought I'm doing everything right. Why do I feel so horrible? And so then I found a doctor who was like 2 hours away from me that I drove. He took more blood than I've ever had taken from me. It was like 13 or 14 vials of blood. And lo and behold, I had my Epstein-Barr antibodies were just through the roof. And he's like, I've never seen anybody with antibodies that high. And oh, by the way, your thyroid doesn't work either. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's why I feel this way. So I started down the road of nutritional supplements. At the time, the clinic is no longer there, but he offered IVs, therapy. I got, glutathione and Myers cocktail, vitamin C, things like that. And I started feeling a little bit better. And I was able actually to start, being able to function. I won't say that it was like an overnight kind of thing because it was a long road. I was, pretty pretty debilitated for a while. I had back surgery. Looking back, I probably wouldn't do that again, but I did at the
They
time.
put you under anesthesia for the back surgery, or was it local? Or
No, they put me under. I ended up having another back surgery. I started going into the Western medicine route. I ended up on 5 different medications. I gained 80 pounds and I felt worse than ever. And it was horrible. So finally, after about 4 years, it was like 3.5, 4 years, I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go back to the natural route and I'm going to figure out how to heal myself because this isn't working. So I took myself off all the medications and I was a nurse, so I could do that. I knew what I was doing.
I was going to
I
ask you, are you a nurse practitioner yet, or just a
I was a
nurse?
registered nurse. I was a registered
Okay.
nurse, but not a nurse practitioner. So I wouldn't recommend just taking yourself off of medications without help. But since I had been a nurse for about 15 years at this time, I knew what I was doing. And so I took myself off of everything and I immediately lost 50 pounds just doing that.
Good
And
grief.
yeah, like 30, I'm sorry, 30 pounds. I immediately lost 30 pounds just taking myself off the medications because my legs got to be like, my ankles were like tree trunks. Like you couldn't even see my feet or ankles. It was terrible. And so then I started looking at what else could be going on. And I met a chiropractor who I went to see, and he's like, you have autoimmune. And I said, well, I kind of figured that, but nobody could figure out, what else is going on. Oh, I did have one doctor somewhere along the way. One of the ones who put me on a medication said, you have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and that's why you feel the way that you do, and that's why everything hurts. Well, just to put it into perspective, I worked in the ICU and I worked in the emergency department. And when we would have patients come in who had those diagnoses, I literally had one night, one doctor looked at the patient coming in. She was in the waiting room. They were getting ready to bring her back and saw the diagnosis of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and said, oh, crazy, lazy, stupid, and drug seeking. And I was like, inside, my stomach just like tied up in knots. And I was like, well, I'm never telling anybody that I have that going on because I don't want them to think that about me. So it was sort of like a shame kind of thing. And so I lived with this secret shame that this was my life. And I must have stressed myself so much about it because I had chickenpox when I was little. Well, at that point, like about 3 months after that doctor said that, I broke out in shingles in the same emergency department, which is, like a manifestation of the same virus all over again.
Hmm.
And from the stress of everything. So anyway, so I knew that I had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, and I knew, that I had the back issues. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to figure this out. So I went to this chiropractor for my back, not for anything else. And he's like, okay, well, I know you think you eat well, you eat organic, you eat vegetarian, but I want you to give up gluten, dairy, eggs, soy, and corn and nightshades. And I was like, okay, well, that's everything I eat. And so I drove, and his office was also an hour and a half from my house. So I drove an hour and a half home crying. I told my husband, what am I going to eat? And so that was like the beginning of when things started to turn in the right direction. He also, like I started to do that diet. He recommended some supplements. I had also started, doing some research and, finding things that were going on that I needed to address within myself with herbs and things like that. And support my thyroid. I had remembered that my thyroid, hadn't been working well, and supported trying to heal my gut, because he's like, you have leaky gut. And I said, what is that? I didn't even know. That's how like naive I was at the time. So I started, learning about leaky gut and how to heal that. And then, so between changing my diet and doing the supplementation, doing a lot of bone broth, things to heal my gut, probiotics, things to, turn all that over. I'm pretty sure I had SIBO. No, I had not gotten a test at the time, but I'm pretty sure I did, just because of some of the symptoms I had. And so over time, I started to heal, and then I kind of hit a plateau again. And that's when he started working with me emotionally. He's like, you have a lot of trauma in your life. You have things that happened when you were a kid. The marriage that you were in wasn't exactly healthy. And he said, let's work on that and see, because there's a mind body connection. We've talked about this before, where the things in our mind and our body we are spirit, soul, and being, spirit,
Mhm.
soul, and body beings. They're all overlapped. And so when the physical body stops progressing, then we have to look at the things emotionally and what's going on in our mind and our emotions that are keeping us locked in. And so I had a lot of things there was a lot of things. Some of them started when I was 4, and I didn't even realize that they were traumatic, except that my little immature 4-year-old brain processed the event. It was, I locked myself in a closet, but because of what I felt, it like deeply scarred me. And so, things like that, we had to work through that. And I started to get better and started to get better. Finally, I got to where I could go back to work. Actually, I had started to go back to work before I saw the chiropractor. I was able to get myself well enough to be able to do that. I went back to work in 2011. I met him in 2014 or 15, something like that. And so then, to add insult to injury, I decided I needed a break from working in the ICU. So I took a job doing case management, because at this point I knew I was going to become a nurse practitioner. So
Mhm.
I took a job in case management, and I started working in this building. And I started to feel terrible again. And I'm like, why do I feel so awful? And lo and behold, the building was riddled with mold. And up until that point, I didn't realize that I was sensitive to mold, but looking back, I had lived in several homes that I know had mold. One house in particular had visible mold, and I didn't know any better. And so when I started working in that office, I just had another crash in my health. I was able to maintain my job because it was a desk job that saved me. I didn't have to be on my feet rushing around, but I started working on cleansing the mold, killing the mold with the herbs and things like that I was taking. And then it actually helped me to go back into the ICU and get out of that moldy building. That and really watching my diet, working on my emotions, working on my mindset, working on, meditation and deep breathing and yoga and things like that to really help um, from a holistic standpoint. And so I was able to do that until 2000, um, 2018. I decided, okay, I feel pretty well, because that actually happened in 2015 and 16 is when I worked in that building, and I was able to get myself back on my feet. And then I'm like, okay, I'm good. I'm actually good. And I started working in the cath lab, which was a much calmer environment. And I went back to school, became a nurse practitioner. And
Yeah, pause you for just a moment.
yeah,
All right, because I've been looking down a whole lot. It's not because I'm on my cell phone or anything. It's because I was taking notes.
yeah,
So for the viewers out there that kept seeing me look down, I jotted this down because you have a really good way of connecting the dots of your own health history. And I think this is super important
yeah,
for those that are watching to remember back. Because if you're able to begin to connect dots of when you started to feel bad, or if you remember certain events throughout your lifetime,
Yes.
it will help you put these pieces together. And so what I did was I filled out your bucket right here.
Ah,
Well, how well you'll be able to see this for the
that's so
viewers. But
good.
so yeah, I have your bucket, and I listed off. Um, so there was adverse childhood events with trauma. You
Yep.
had mono as a kid, chickenpox as a kid. You were in a car wreck in which you died.
Yeah.
So there's physical stressors. You had 2 back surgeries placed under anesthesia. So there's a lot of exposures to traumas there,
Yep.
not just with the surgery, but with the different drugs that they got to use to keep you under. Um, you had a child that died. So there's some emotional components there. You had shingles. You were exposed to mold. And so I just want people to understand that all of this stuff had filled up Teresa's bucket in a
Yeah.
sense, and we all have these different sized buckets in our body based on
Yeah.
our genetic makeup. Some people have smaller buckets than others, and some people have bigger buckets than others, meaning that you might be able to tolerate more. Well, as we know with Teresa's story, she's sharing here that her bucket filled up fairly quickly, and she had mentioned she dealt with fatigue, and was just kind of tired all the time, and then always achy with pains.
Yep.
And then we
Brain
got
didn't
the
work. Felt like my brain was turned off a lot of times.
focus, memory, word recall. And then we had the pushback from the medical community who said that you were just a crazy person.
Yep.
And I'm sure a lot of people in our audience can relate with these circumstances with either the medical community or maybe perhaps someone in their friends circle or anybody that just thinks they're a crazy person, that it's all up in their head, but it's really not.
Because all the
You
tests that they did were all normal. Everything was fine. I was like, well, I don't feel fine.
And this is really what separates you and your practice apart, is that you focus on getting to the level of the cell. You don't just
Yeah.
focus on a specific organ, which can be great, but it doesn't really teach the body how to actually regenerate itself at a cellular level so that it can continue to heal and produce the energy that it needs. And these lab tests are often superficial at a level that we don't really know what's going on unless you've already got a full-blown disease.
Yeah.
Well, you just had some things that were betraying you, and that was your immune system. You had said you went to a doctor who told you you had fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. You went to a chiropractor who said you had an autoimmune condition. And then it was the titers to your antibody, the antibodies to your Epstein-Barr that were really, really high. And you've done a lot of things, with supplements, herbs, botanicals, IV therapy, this has to
Myopathy.
set
Mhm.
a lot of different things, right? And so many modalities, right? And then all this stuff adds up and costs a lot of money over time, especially trying to work through all these things. Um, Having to give up certain foods and try to find the lifestyle of nutrition that's, supporting to your body, the way that your body wants to react to foods, so you can give it the information. Um, what was it from your conventional standpoint? You said you were a nurse for 15 years. You took yourself off medications and lost 30 pounds just off the meds. That's incredible. Um, when you became a nurse practitioner, though, what was the differentiation there to learning, getting down to the level of the cell to really fix these conditions for good?
Yeah. So when I was, excuse me, when I was, the catalyst for going to become a nurse practitioner really came from a conversation. That chiropractor that I went to became my best friend. He and his wife are my husband and my best friend.
That's
And
awesome.
so we used to get together regularly and have, we called them business meetings. They were friend business meetings. And we would talk about his business and we would talk about my future, and we were trying to decide like the best way for me to focus my career path, and to make a long story short, rather than moving to the other side of the country to become a naturopathic medical doctor, I decided to continue the nurse route to become a nurse practitioner, and then went to school to also train as a traditional naturopath. So I did those two things at the same time from 2018 to 2020. I literally graduated by the skin of my teeth in the beginning of the pandemic. They had shut everything down and decided everything was like completely, I was done for like 3 months. All I could do was my online didactic. And they decided we were essential. So they let us back in to do our practicum time, to do our clinicals. And I was able to graduate in August. Well, in the meantime, where I was working in the cath lab. I didn't have, they were only doing elective, they were doing essential, non-elective procedures. And so I only worked 1 week a month, and then I had 3 weeks to do schoolwork and study. So I enrolled immediately upon finishing school. I immediately rolled into a functional medicine course. And functional medicine really is the root cause. If the tree above the ground is all the symptoms and all the disease names and the things that you feel and the things that you're diagnosed with, everything under in the root system, that's what's going on. That's the cause. So functional medicine takes care of everything under it looks for the cause, like the why behind. And so I
Let me
did,
ask you real quick about this. So
yeah.
you had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. What were the symptoms, and then what was the cause? Because I bet there's a lot of people who don't understand. Maybe they don't even have the diagnosis, but they experience these symptoms. What are the symptoms that you experienced, and what were the causes?
Yeah, for fibromyalgia, well, the chronic fatigue was just chronically tired. Like and I explained this to my husband. I said, I'm not sleepy. It's not like I could just close my eyes and go back to sleep. That's different. This is fatigue, and it's fatigue beyond just being tired. This is fatigue that I feel like I am wearing a leaded apron, like the kind they put on you when you go to get a x-ray. I feel like I have 5 of those on me every day, all the time. And like I just, in my brain, I couldn't think straight. Everything was just like brain fog was out the wazoo. And and the fibromyalgia can be, have fatigue, but it's a lot of just tender points. There's bilateral 11 places that you push on those spots, and if you have pain in, I think the criteria is 7 of the 11, then you get diagnosed with fibromyalgia. I had all 11 on both sides, and it was not like a little pain. It was like she barely touched me, and I was like, it was like she poked me with a searing knife.
Wow.
And the cause for, fibromyalgia is and, and chronic fatigue for that matter. They're both diagnoses of exclusion. Like they rule other things out first. And then for me, like they really didn't know why at the time, because this was like my first official diagnosis of fibromyalgia was 2009. They didn't know hardly anything back then. And now they're learning more. And what I believe for me was the cause was the Epstein-Barr, so the same virus that causes mono. And I had had multiple multiple mold exposures. I found out later that I had antibodies to mold. I'm sorry, antibodies to Lyme, which meant that I had gotten bit by a tick, which I knew I had, but like I hadn't like put 2 and 2 together. So I had Lyme, and trying to think what else showed up when I did my first lab work. Those are the 3. It was the virus, um, and I know that I didn't, back when I'm in my 50s. So back in my time, we didn't get vaccinated. I had the mumps, I had the measles, I had chicken pox, I had
Mhm.
everything. We didn't get flu vaccines, we didn't anything like that. So I had, everything, all the childhood illnesses, I had them all. And I had lived in several homes, including my mom reminded me of when the house I lived in went between the ages of 2 to 5. We had, I'm 2 to 7. We lived there for 5 years. We had mold in that basement. There were rats in the basement. It was like my dad was a pastor. We lived what they told us to live. We didn't have a choice. There were cockroaches in the next house that we lived in. So I was exposed to all this stuff. And the other thing that came to be it, I found out later that just added to it was I didn't know microwaving wasn't safe. Like I remember when microwaves came out in the 80s, I got one and didn't know how to use it. I didn't know that plastic, or especially microwaving in plastic, was bad. I didn't, we didn't live on processed food when I was a kid, but
Mhm.
when I was eventually learning more stuff, like when I was in school, we used some prepackaged food.
Well, how did
I
you
did,
eat as a nurse, working 15 years as a nurse in the hospital? What was your dietary lifestyle like?
yeah, well, I was, like I said, by that time, I became a vegetarian when I was pregnant with my first daughter because I had hyperemesis gravida, meaning I threw up all day long for 9 months, which I found out later is a histamine intolerance. So
Wow.
now fast forward 20 some, almost 30 years, I did my genetics. I, don't I'm an overproducer of histamine. I don't methylate well. I don't detox well. You know, I have a lot of genetic things that don't have to express themselves in that way. But because I had all these other environmental things that influenced them, those genes turned on. And um, so what I ate was a lot of pasta. I ate whole wheat. Of course I ate whole wheat. I made my own yogurt. I made my own bread, you know, and I thought I ate really, really well, but I didn't know that the wheat was causing leaky gut. You know, I didn't when I was a single mom, I didn't always buy organic. I didn't know that the glyphosate, the Roundup that's sprayed on things, I was eating whole food, but it was not organic. So that glyphosate was creating intestinal permeability, i.e., leaky gut, where there's gut damage. And so eventually what happened is as the gut, you know, my gut got so damaged, it was so terribly torn up that, you know, I developed antibodies against food, and then I became very sensitive to a lot of foods. And over time, so what I ate was a lot, you know, I ate whole wheat bagels. I ate organic cream cheese on the bagels, you know. I had salad with chickpeas and, you know, all that was great, but I had peppers and tomatoes on every salad. Both of those are nightshades, you know, which can cause extra inflammation in people who are sensitive to the um, what's the thing in nightshades? I'm
There's
trying to think.
glycoalkaloids and such.
Yeah, disolamine. So yeah, I didn't know that I thought I was eating healthy, and it was just it was all the stuff that was over little by little just damaging my gut to where then I was, and then because of being in the moldy house that I lived in when I rented, and then going to that moldy work building, and then the next house I lived in had mold, you know, all those things were just triggering, you know, to where now I am like 98%, 100. I have so much energy. I'm not tired, you know, like now I'm more sleepy than I'm tired because I burn the candle at both ends working for myself. But the thing that I have to be careful with is still some of the foods. I still have
Okay.
to really watch. I now have rosacea. If I eat dairy, I get like, and they're not like zits. They're like, I can feel them under my skin. They start to tingle and then they pop. And I was like, oops, yep, I had a piece of cheese yesterday at someone's house and they offered it to me. So, and
I
I
want to
even
share.
thought I got grass-fed whey. No, you know, it was like really good whole glass, you know, and tried it and yep, nope. So I just can't for right now until my gut heals completely. That is where I just draw the line. I don't eat gluten and I don't eat dairy. And if I do, the gluten for me, my ankles swell up and I hold on to water, and dairy, I get the outbreaks. But other than that, I feel great. I don't have the fibromyalgia is like non-existent. The chronic fatigue is
That's awesome.
gone. You know, I've treated myself for mold. I've treated myself for the viruses. I've treated myself for the Lyme, and all using herbs. I haven't taken antibiotics or anything like that.
That's really awesome. And we're coming up at the end of our video here, and we'll have to do a part two on kind of looking at the actual treatment process because I already know that people are going to be commenting and watching this video want to know what'd you take, what'd you do.
Yeah,
People always want to know the secret sauce of
it's a
you know what
secret
supplements. And
sauce.
but I
I've
don't.
learned so much even from the beginning of my journey. If I knew then what I know now, it would have been probably a shorter journey, but it's all good.
Well, there's a couple things I want to say to this in closing, but I went back to your bucket and I probably filled in about 15 more things on here.
My
Lime
poor
was
bucket, man, oh man.
glyphosate. There was certain foods that your body wasn't tolerating well. So the glutens, the nightshades, the dairies. You were microwaving, so we have environmental toxins from plastics. There's phthalates. There's BPA. These are leaching into food. These are hormone disruptors that are going into your body.
Yep.
So, I mean, anybody who's watching this video, you have to understand that when you have all of these things in your bucket starts to spill over into symptoms, and it's just a matter of time. Now, what I love that Teresa has done here is in throughout her journey, right? It is a journey. you still have to be cognizant. You're not perfect. You still have to be very aware of what you're doing and what you're putting in your body. I wish it were as easy as, we can just become bulletproof and eat whatever we want and no longer hurt us. But the case is just being proactive and preventative into where we are aware because we have taken control of our health and we know what we will react to, what we won't. We know we have a plan, so to speak, so that we don't succumb to disease or, what we see today. We see today, like half of our population is overweight. Half of our population, if not more, is on medications. And just because it appears normal, because it's so common, doesn't mean it's normal.
Yeah.
When I go to secondhand stores, I love shopping at secondhand stores for clothes. When I go there and I can only find clothes for like overweight people. I'm just like looking at myself. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like I can't find mediums. I can't find 32, 32s. Like, why is it so difficult to find shirts for my average size? I
Yeah.
find lots of overweight stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just like, man, it's a crisis for the public to know and understand that unfortunately our governing body is not in our best interest. They don't have our best interest at heart,
Yeah.
and you've
Yeah.
done so much. And
Yeah. There, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like I went on a mission trip a couple weeks ago, and you kind of like you're at the mercy of whatever's there to eat. So
mhm,
I go prepared. I take certain enzymes. If I know am probably going to get exposed to gluten, I have enzymes that I take that help me to process it. It's not foolproof, but it's a whole lot better. Um, I can walk into a moldy building. I can tell there's mold, but I don't have the like, oh my gosh, you have to scoop me off the floor kind of fatigue that I used to.
mhm,
Um, and there's certain foods that cause more histamine than others, but like one of the high histamine foods is kombucha and water kefir, and I still drink
mhm,
those. Um, and I eat sauerkraut where I used to not be able to because I would just immediately have like heart palpitations and a flushed rash and stuff. So I just you have to be cognizant of where, be mindful. Don't be afraid. Living in
right,
fear is like the last thing that you can do. And the other thing I will say, just to wrap it up, is you are not your diagnosis.
right.
Like I refuse to say I have this. I struggle with things, but I am not those things.
Yeah,
Do
it's all
I
reframing how we position our talk around
because I used to
our labeling.
identify as that all the time.
Mhm,
And that's how I live my life. I think that's part of why it took me longer to heal than what I could have because I
yeah.
so identified with it.
And
And
that's
I'll
the thing.
just
I think at times we forget to live and enjoy life because we're so
yeah,
focused on our condition. Now, I know it can be harder and we have a bigger obstacle that we have to climb over because of that condition. But I think at the bottom of it all, we still have to remember, I want to enjoy my life. I don't want to allow this to hinder me and keep me down. As hard, as easy that is for me to say, still remember to enjoy life, to do whatever
yeah,
you can to just enjoy and find peace and gratitude in your life. That will
yeah.
carry you along and help you endure in so many levels.
Yeah, gratitude will go a long way, being thankful and grateful every day.
I
Every,
wanted to say this about your story too as we wrap up, is that there was no magic pill. There was no
yeah,
magic piece of information. It was everything in its totality. And I always find that there's a lot of people looking for that magic pill. And I wish it was that easy where I could just give you that one supplement because that would be the cure, right? If there was just that
yeah,
one magic supplement. There's
yeah,
supplements that support that help, but there's not that one magic pill. There's not that magic piece of information. It's encompasses all of these things that you did with the lifestyle, with the diet, with the mindset, overcoming through the trauma that you mentioned,
mhm,
and just continuing day by day, getting 1% better day by day.
yeah,
And then
for
here we are
sure.
today. You said that you get sleepy, but you're not, drained, exhausted, fatigued,
No,
you
I
know.
literally went on a cleaning spree this morning and I was feeling inspired. And when I feel, being in the spirit and feeling inspired, I just follow the lead. And I was like, let's get stuff done.
Yeah,
Ugh,
that's amazing. Well, I would love to talk at part two, leave a cliffhanger and go into a part two about this, more about, the treatment options, because I know there's a lot of people out there, women especially, who suffer with fibromyalgia, even Hashimoto's, which are like your two passions of helping individuals overcome. And, it's just understanding where the immune system was hijacked, and what's causing the immune system to be so hyperactive against your own body and attack it.
Yeah.
And so next week, maybe we can go into a part 2 of this and just talk about some of the
Yep.
strategies that can really help
Absolutely.
people get their life back, because this is valuable information that changes people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You have a blessed weekend. We will
All
see
right.
you again this week.
All right. You as well.